me properly. My internet is a bit slower side today. So if I just see it. So let me know whenever you think that if there is any mistake. It's on a bit slower side, but let me see. Let me just let me know if you are able to see anything over there. If you get stuck or if you see like I'm lacking in terms of internet or voice. Okay. So here, um, what we were trying to discuss at the end of the session or in between that is we were trying to use a view before all, and then we were trying to use page over there. So page is only meant for test. Wherever we write a test function, which will be for an individual test function every time. So then how do we achieve that is what we discussed at the end that we'll see using the browser. And using the browser fixture, you will be able to achieve that whatever the scenario that we were trying to discuss. But when you use a browser, we also have to basically like create a context and create a page on that browser, right? So how do we do that is you have to get the context over here as a variable, which will be first, let's take it as a page. Why are we trying to write there? Or why are we trying to write over here? Okay, so let me show you just over here. So what we'll do is first using a browser, we have to create a context, which is just give me a minute. Okay, so using the browser fixture, we have to basically install, we have to first create a context. So you can simply use a new context method, which will create a new context that we have to that we can store inside a variable. Let's say I'll just say it as context over here, which is await browser equals to new context. And then we also have to create a page, right? So if you just say it as a const page equals to context dot new page, right? Context dot new page. This will be able to help us in using like in this is something like where you can perform pre like prerequisite part for all the test case that you have written inside the before all. And in this case, you will only be able to log in once, and whatever the test case that are there in terms of for the same pages in the same workflow, it will be able to define your test case, define your execution of the test case on the same.
But this will not share the page context because you define the page within the
Right. That
before
is what
dot clause.
I was coming up with that. I was coming up with that itself. So that is where earlier I was trying to declare a page over here by saying let page, because if you use it inside the context over here, in this case, whatever the things we have used it over here, this will be available only inside the before all and will not be shared inside other test case that you have given. So to use it inside other functions or inside other test cases, we have to take it outside of the functions over here, outside of the curly braces, and that will become at a global level. Okay, so this setup will generally help you to perform the similar workflow that we were trying to discuss earlier. Let's try to see whether it is working or not, and then we'll also debug in the same way, however it is working over here. So we are again doing, we have not changed any other things. What did we do is we have just did a setup over here. We did a mistake. Let's just So what we're trying to do is we're just trying to set it up everything inside the before all, whatever we did earlier by using before each. And then all these test cases that we have over here, we are trying to run in this case. Okay, so let's run it once again. Okay, so now this I've selected add to cart, and this will also go for view page, and have been selected over here. So this can be achieved by using a browser fixture, and this will we'll not be able to perform by using a page fixture over here. In case of a browser fixture, this page context will be shared across like whatever the test case that you have written, and then whatever the workflow that we have, we'll be able to achieve in this case by using a browser. By page, it generally says that this before all have given a role to set up the suit label or suite label, whereas page that it has given only for the test level. So that is where it has not given a support for the page fixture inside the report. Okay, that's good. That you people have gone through. Some of you, Chandan, have also achieved this. Thanks a lot for this. Okay, now um, let's move to see like how do we have everything over here. So I'll not disturb this for now. Let's create one another test case. I'll say it as, let's say, dashboard page test.spec.ts. Okay, I'll come back to again the before each over here. You can utilize however we have gone through. If you try to use, if you want to use before all, you can use in the same way however we have seen. If you want to use before each, I'll just go back to this page fixture over here. Okay. Now, what we have done is everything that we have defined over here is in the hardcode. That means all the values, all the required data we have stored inside this Excel. Okay. Let's see how do we take the help by using different concepts over here. One, by using JSON. Two, by using Excel. And three, also by using environment properties file. Okay, so all these three different ways we'll see in our session today to see how do we drive the data from different files over here. First, we'll go ahead and create it for a JSON. All the data will store it inside the JSON, and we'll see how do we drive that inside. I'll drive it inside this dashboard page test, and you can do the same things inside the login page. But what you have to do is you can simply copy paste it inside the JSON, and from there you can get it. You can copy paste inside the Excel for the data driven testing, and you can perform the same thing. Or depending on the environment file files, also you will be able to perform this. But let's see one by one over here. First, I'll create one file, which I'll just give the name as, let's say, order.json. Some random name I've given over here, or in anyways, like we'll be mostly providing the login way. So I'll just say it as login.json. What is JSON? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. I hope you have started good. Yes. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. That means it will be similar to a Java object, similar to an object that we create in JavaScript or TypeScript, right? But we understood the concept earlier that whenever we create an object in terms of JavaScript or TypeScript, it used to be something like this, which let's say you say it as object equals to value inside the curly braces, and then with a key and value pair in the format of key and value pair, right? So key will we do not have to write it in the form of string inside the object, because internally it will consider the key as a string format, and value can be of any type. Whereas whenever we have to create a JSON is also similar to an object. Here we also have to provide the key in the form of here we also have to provide the key in the form of string format as well. This will also be starting or we have to write the data inside the curly braces itself, and all the values will be in the form of key and value. Both will be in the form of key and value. And key, we also have to define inside the quotation. That means as a part of string value. So in this case, if you see over here, we have URL, we have username, we have password, and we have product name, that we have the data that we're trying to use inside the dashboard page. Right? So these data, we can copy it inside our JSON file. So how do we have to generate the JSON is inside the curly braces, you have to write it in the form of key and value pair. So key is URL. And again, however we define inside the object key colon value, it has to be defined in the same way over here. And what is the value that we have for this? The value is the URL that we are trying to use over here. So this URL we have to provide in this case. And all the subsequent values will be separated with a comma over here, as it happens in terms of JavaScript object as well. Second, we have a username. That username value we can provide over here, which will again be separated with a comma. And third will be a password that we can again provide over here. And in this case, we also have another one, which is product name that we have to take, and that we can provide again in the form of whatever the value that we have taken over here. So username, we have this value that I'm just trying to copy paste, which is username over here. Password again, it is this value, whatever the value that we have in terms of working with password. So that password we can provide it over here. And product name, we have taken some value over here, so that I can, or that we can take it as a part of product name inside this. We have to separate every value with a comma, and this becomes your JSON file. JSON, whenever you are trying to define a single JSON object, single JSON data, you have to take it inside the curly braces. And inside the curly braces, all the values will be in the form of key colon value. Key should always be over here inside the JSON in the form of string value. Second, all the values will be separated with a comma symbol over here. Okay, so this is the JSON that we have defined. But when we have a larger data, JSON, like declaration of a data inside the JSON, becomes a bit tricky. And that is where we used to go for Excel data, where we can define all the data in a row and column format. And that will become similar to the tabular format. That we'll again see in the next 15 minutes of time. So whenever you have a single data, you can provide it in this way, which is available inside the curly braces and all the data that we have given over here. Okay. Whenever you have to do a data-driven testing, that time we have to take all these things multiple times. And when you take all these things multiple times, we have to place it inside the square bracket. That means in the form of square over here. In the form of, sorry, array, not square, in the form of array over here. That we'll see again in the next 5 minutes. So this is the data that we have taken over here, which is in the form of login.json that we have given. Now all these value, we have to define it. We have to take it from the JSON now. So we have already defined. I'm just trying to move it from here. Let's remove it from here one by one. Now, whenever you also get the data inside this, whenever you are trying to get, you have declared a JSON file and that you are trying to get it inside this file, we have to import that file inside our inside whichever class that you are trying to import. That means we have created a login.json. We have created a login.json over here, which is having some data. Whichever class that you are trying to use this data, inside that class, we have to import first. We have to import the JSON data first. Okay. And how do we import this? By using an import. So whenever import keyword, whenever we import this, whenever we import this value inside your .js or .ts file, this will become something like this without having a curly braces. So without having curly braces for key over here. Whenever you import your JSON data inside .js or inside .ts file, this will become something like this, which is URL, some value, username, some value, password, some value, and then uh, whatever the product name that we have given will become in this way. And that whenever we import this, we can store inside some value which will become something like this, which is URL is having this value, username is having this value, password is having this value, and product name is having this value. And this might be reminding something that we have gone through inside our TypeScript. It becomes similar to it becomes similar to
Object.
object in
Obviously.
TypeScript, right? And how do we get the data from an object?
Dot
By
notation or
use
back notation.
right, right.
Dot net.
So object
Data dot something.
data.url, data.username, data.password, and data.product name, right? So whenever we define this, we define it in this way, which is inside a data, inside a object, we are trying to store this, right? So whenever you import JSON file inside your .js or .ts file, that will get imported in the form of object. That will get imported in the form of object, and that we have to store inside some variable. So let's say I'll say it as import data from, where are we trying to import? We are trying to import inside the test data folder over here, right? Now these value that you see have been imported automatically when we try to create an object for these classes. But let's say if we have to do manually, how do we do that? So currently we are inside a test folder over here. If you see, currently we are inside a dptest.spec.ts file, and that we are available, that we are basically inside test folder over here, right? Now our goal over here is to go to the test data folder and then go inside the login.json file so that whatever the data are available inside this file will get imported inside our dp.spec.test. Okay. Now, how do we go to this one? We are basically inside this test folder, but we have to go inside test data folder over here. Okay. So let's understand one thing, that how do we import this? How do we basically go from one folder to another? So I'll just say it as test. Okay. Now we are inside this test folder over here. Right? We are inside this test folder over here. How do we come back to the root folder? Can anyone help me to just come back to the root folder? How do we come back?
CD dot dot.
No,
Right.
dot dot.
So we use cd dot dot
CD
over
dot
here,
dot. Yeah.
right? So whenever we have to come back from one folder to the root folder, we simply have to say cd dot dot, right? So to import it over here, we'll simply say it as two dots over here. This will take us out from this test folder inside this. When you say cd dot dot, this will take us to the root folder. In the same way, whenever you say two dots over here, along with a forward slash, two dot along with a forward slash, this two dot will take us outside from this test folder. That means after this two dots, we basically came to the root folder. And from this root folder, we have to go to, and we have to basically go inside a test data folder, right? So to go to test data folder, we simply say it as cd and then the folder name, cd test data, which takes us to the test data folder. In the same way, we'll simply say it as a forward slash and the test data folder name over here. And inside this, if you want to go to any other files that are available inside this, you can simply say add forward slash and then whichever file that you are trying to refer over here. Okay. So whenever you have to come out of one folder and move to the another folder, you just have to provide a two dot and forward slash. Let's say if you have another folder available inside test, then you have to come out first from that particular folder. So you have to provide a two dot forward slash, again two dot a forward slash to come out of this test folder and then go inside this one. Currently, we do not have any other folder, so we have to just provide. To come out of one folder, you have to provide two dots. To come out of two folder, four dots, and so on. Two dots forward slash, two dots again forward slash. Okay, and that is what we have imported. What we have imported, this JSON file that we have given over here, we have imported inside the data. We have just imported inside data, and let's try to do one thing, try to print what is data it is displaying over here. Okay, let's try to run the test case. We know that this will fail, but we are not interested in whether test case is failing or passing over here. Now, if you see that it has printed the value over here in the same way, however, we have discussed earlier, which is in the form of a JSON, in the form of an object, which is having inside the curly braces, URL, some value, username, some value, and so on. And these objects have been placed inside the variable that we have used over here, which is data in this case. Okay, these value that we have placed it inside the JSON file have been placed inside the data over here. So this data becomes the object, and whenever we have to use any data, any data that are available inside JSON, we have to get URL over here. So we can simply say it as data.url. If URL is available inside the file that we are trying to get, it will return us that value. Again, username, again, data.username. So let's say if you try to say it as username1, it will anyways throw you an error saying that username1 is not available inside this. Okay, so again, for the password again, why are we saying data dot? Because data becomes an object over here, and to get the value for certain key, we have to just see it as dot key, object dot key. Here as well, we require the same thing, which is data dot product name. And wherever we require the data from the external file, we have to just say it as data, because we have stored all the values from the JSON inside a variable known as data.
But
Okay.
we didn't initialize the data as the right.
Whenever you say import and something value over here, all the values will get stored inside this variable that you have mentioned over here. What did we not initialize?
I mean, the data variable data is not been given in the login.json file, right? So that's why I had a question on that.
No, data we do not have. This is a JSON file. This is a complete
Okay.
JSON file, right? This is not an object. This is a JSON file where we have given all the values inside the curly braces. And whenever you import a JSON file inside your .js or .ts file, that will get imported in the form of object, and that object we are storing inside this variable.
Okay.
So we are mentioning data over here, that whatever the value or whatever the data that we are importing from JSON, we are storing it inside data over here.
Data
Okay.
as a variable, right? You're saying about
Data as a variable. Right.
fine.
So, Praveen, instead of like putting data.url, username.url and all that, we can create a variable
We can create.
directly.
We can do in any other way as well.
So
So
if
what you
variable is created in the global scope, it can still access, right?
right, yes. So you can simply say it as URL equals to data.url. Okay, you can also do it in this way that you can create a variable. If you have multiple things, you can create if you have multiple test cases, we only have 2 test cases. We have directly given a data.url, data.username. But you
Because
can
we
also
thought,
do it in
yeah, okay.
you can also do it in this way as well. You can create variables, and that variable you can pass it over to saying that URL, password, username, and other things.
So Praveen, in this case, like if in a bigger scenario, then it means like if we have a common class where we can declare this as a global variable, and then we can utilize in all other pages or wherever we want to do. Is that correct? That approach also it will work, right?
So this data you can also do it inside the before all as well. Whatever the data that you are fetching, you can create basically one before all, test.before all, and store as a global variable. All the data you can load it inside the before all, and then you can store you utilize it inside any other things.
Okay.
Second is you can also create a utility function where you can import this data. And inside utility function, you can store all the data that are available inside the JSON. And then again, you can import those utility function inside any of the classes wherever you want to import that. But in general, we do not require those things because let's say if you want this inside this class as well, you can just import this data over there, import this JSON file over there. Whenever you create it inside the before all as a utility function, that will again become a bit complex over there. Instead, you can directly import this JSON file, whichever class that you want to store, and from there you can directly use it as a data dot whatever the value that you're trying to look out for. You understood,
Oh,
right?
yeah, got it. Yeah, thank you.
So inside this file as well, you can import that, and same data will be available over here. You can replace all the values from here as well. In the same way, however, we have done, you can import this and replace this inside the test file over here as well. Remove this username, password, URL. Instead, we can use it like data.url. Again, data.password, data.password over here. This data.url. And it will work in the same way if you just try to run this, which is available inside, which is basically available inside. And this we are trying to run for the valid login scenario. So let's see whether it is getting the data from JSON file or not. Yes, it have been validated. So it have successfully gotten the data from that. Let's go back to this DP test over here and try to run both of the test case. I think we have given data.product name, everything we have given over here. Now let's try to execute the test case and see if it is working or not. If it have been working for login, so it should work for this as well. And it is working in the same way, however, it have been given over there. So as I have given before or before each, so it is working for working in the different way. Okay, so JSON making a data inside the JSON becomes easy, but this will become easy whenever you are not performing data-driven testing. But when you are trying to perform a data-driven testing, we have to write in a bit differently. So how do we follow in terms of a data-driven testing is, let's say I'll just say it as dd.json, which is data-driven.json. And inside this data-driven means the same field that we are trying to execute for the multiple values, like multiple input values. So whenever we try to create, here we have used a single data. Whenever we go for a multiple data, that means we have to use same data multiple times along with different inputs value. If you have, let's say I've used it 3. But whenever you create a .json inside, you can only use in this format, you can only use a single curly braces over here. A single curly braces. That means start curly braces and end curly braces in a like one particular data. But whenever you are trying to store a multiple values, then we have to make it inside the array. What is array? We stored the data inside a square bracket. So we simply have to say that start a square bracket, and then you can store all the values, whatever the number of data that you are trying to store in the form of JSON, that we can store by separating with a comma. So now these value that you see becomes an array, and inside the array we have different like object that we have given over here in the form of JSON inside this JSON file. So inside the JSON, we can also create an array as well by just using square bracket and provide all the data that we have to provide in the form of separated with a comma.
Can we do this? Chat? No, usually in the JSON file, we create data in the same pattern right now, just you are showing. Because most of the time we have to run on a different environment, so this value changes.
Right.
So in this array, we can create an object and assign all these curly braces to some keys, right?
Correct.
And
So we
we can
define it
access
over
using
here.
that. Yeah, let's say you put it all
Correct.
the
You
things in the,
do it
yeah,
over
let's say,
here, and
yeah, you have to put that in the curly braces, right? First.
this will become inside this. You have to again put it inside the curly braces, and
Yeah,
then
data one, data two.
so this becomes your key for, let's say, QA environment. Let's say example QA environment. Then again, whenever you have to something and separate it with something. Again, this have been closed over here. Again, if you want to open for staging, you have to do it in this way, which
So
is
why we are, can't we put everything in one curly braces and just make all this as one object? What I'm saying, QA is equal to, that's
you
correct.
can do.
Instead of, yeah,
You
instead
can
of
do
closing
this.
that bracket, close that at the very end. Yeah. And then give this object some keys, all the other objects.
We can do it in that way as well. We can, if you do not want to separate it for all the values, we can perform in this way as well. So this is all. This is generally we try to perform whenever we have a data that is separated for the environment. But in terms of a playwright, I'll show you the easiest way how do we manage these values.
Yeah.
Like in next 15 minutes, we'll show you how do we do this value. But generally, we try to derive in this way, create an array inside that we can create a key which will hold all the values that you have placed it over here. For different values, this becomes a key for QA, for staging, whichever you want to get it, you can simply get it from the array by just placing it as a QA. Okay, I'll just move for now to the other part that we were trying to discuss. Okay. So these are the value that we have taken in terms of a data-driven testing. Data-driven testing means for the same field, we'll be utilizing with multiple values. Currently, for this particular application, I do not have much login over here, like many user ID over here. So what I'll do is I believe, two different user ID. This one I am trying to use. I'm not sure which I've used over here. So let's see. Okay, so which one I'm trying to use? I'm not sure what is the password for this. No idea. I forgot the password for this. I'll set it up. But for now, what I'm trying to say is I'm just using the same email address that I have, which is existing currently one. And inside this, I'll change all the product name. So for one, I'll get like some values. For others, we'll get it as, let's say, this one. For the other time that we are trying to do the selection of a selection of a product. And for the third one, we'll make it as this one. Okay. So if you see in this case, URL, username, password are same for all the three different data that we have provided. Only the thing that is changing over here is a product name. Okay. So all these data will be utilized for a data-driven testing. And we have again created it inside the JSON in the form of array. Now, how do we do a data-driven testing? Now, this becomes an array. This becomes generally an array. And from the array, we are inside the array, we basically have the value in the form of object. Every value is in the form of object over here, right? So let's say we have const a equals to this array. How do we get the data from array? It's we can use an index. Second, when you go for utilizing an off value, like for off, if you still remember the looping concept, which is for off, for off value, right? So in terms of for off, what happened is for off is basically help us in navigating through or iterating through the array. So it will get one by one the value when you say it as, let's say, const item from this particular element. First time this item will get the first value, which is this one. And how do we get the data from this one? This is in the form of object. So this item first time will get the first object. And to use like URL, username, password, we can simply say it as item dot URL, item dot username, item dot password. I'm just trying to give some name over here. So let's say I'll say it as simple data. So data dot username, data dot password, data dot URL will get the value from the first one first time. Again, when it iterate through second time, this will get the value from second data. Again, when it iterate through for the third time, it will get the value from the third data over here. We have handled this scenario earlier inside the object. So let's keep this over here same. However, we have given, I'll create another, which I'll say it as db data driven dot spec dot ts. Now here we are trying to do a data driven testing. Data-driven testing means we have a multiple data available inside this, and we can give the reference of the other file that we are trying to use, which is dd.json over here, and make it as a like data so that we are getting multiple data from this. Now let's do one thing. Let's also try to first print this and check what kind of data that we are trying to receive over here, trying to get it from the data over here. We know that how the data will be getting pictorial we have understood, but let's see how do we get the data from here whenever we try to run. So let's click it over here, run, and then first we'll get the data. So if you see, the data is in the form of square bracket. That means available inside the square bracket, and all the values are available over here in the form of object, right? Inside the square bracket, which is an array, in the form of object, all the data are available, right? So whenever we iterate through this value, first time it will get this object, and whatever the value will be providing over here inside the for off loop, that variable will get the first data. And we can say that variable dot URL, variable dot username and password, and so on. Okay, so this data that we have over here will get the value in the form of array. And that array we have to iterate through one by one. That array we have to iterate through one by one again over here. Now, few things happen over here in this case is whenever, what is meant by before each? Before each means it will run once for running before running each and every test case, right? So what we have to take care over here whenever we are trying to iterate through the multiple datas, if you try to iterate through from the before each itself, if you try to iterate through from the before each itself, then before each will be loaded whatever the number of data that you have those many times first, and then it will go for a test. What I'm trying to say, let's observe it and then we'll make it in a however it works in general. So how do we write the for of loop? Do we have to how do we basically go check it like iterating through the data from an array? So we'll write a loop over here, which is data of datas, right? That means we are saying that this is a variable which will accept the value from this particular datas one by one. What is datas? Datas in an array over here. Okay, and we have to close it at the end. Inside whichever test case we are trying to parameterize the data, we are closing after that particular things. Okay, so it started throwing us an error at the test level. Can anyone guess what is happening? Why it is throwing an error over here?
Indexing is missing.
Indexing. Okay.
Reference data not defined. Data.url.
It's data.
We don't have these values as of now.
We have data dog. This was for the previous run.
Yeah, so in that case, you are directly, that was an
We have
object. On object, you can apply URL, but this is right now in form of
this data
complete
is in the
object.
form of object.
Yeah, so
This
within the
data
form,
is array.
Mm.
This data is array, and this data is in the form of object.
but there are multiple objects this will hold, right? So how?
So first iteration, this data will get first value is in the form of this. Second iteration, this will get the second value, which is this one. Third iteration, it will get the third value. From the array, for off loop will pick one by one the data. First time first value, second time second value will get stored, third
Yeah,
time third value.
that I understood, but before each will run just once. I mean, this will be fetch the data because we are putting for of loop before each. I mean, it's outside of that block.
Hmm.
So
Right.
how? So it will not have the access to it on each iteration what data it is coming.
It will have access to that as well. But I think you understood one concept over here. What will happen in this case is I'll come back to that issue. What will happen is whatever the number of data that you have inside this array, before each will run those many times first before it goes and run the first test case. Whatever the again number of data that you have inside the array for the second test case as well, before test will run those many times. So whenever we are trying to run the data driven testing, whatever data required inside any of the steps, that we can take it inside the test case itself. So data driven testing, whenever you are trying to achieve, we do not have to do it inside the before each. We have to do it at the test level. Why? I'll show you that. But that is irrespective of why it is throwing us an error. If I just hover over, you'll understand that. But I believe like we have discussed this earlier. Anyone, if you can identify this? Okay, let me hover over. Let me hover over. So what it says? Error. Duplicate test title,
Yeah.
which is available inside a main title dashboard page test. And this says that add the product to the cart is duplicated multiple times over here. For the first time when it gets the data, the same title will be utilized over here. For the second data as well, the same title will be utilized And for the third data as well, the same title will be utilized. So this will get confused at the time of generation of a report, and that's where Playwright says that your title inside the test kit should have to be a unique title inside the test case should have to be a unique. That means we have to make our test case parameterized. In however we try to do this, but we have to make our test case parameterized over here. Either what we can do is I believe like our product name is unique over here, so that product name we can utilize as data driven. So it will say that add the product to the cart for first product name, validate the product details for first product, then second time it will get second product, third time it will get third product, and so
Uh,
on. else
Actually, I didn't understand what is happening here.
else we can also create some kind of let's say indexing system which will automatically increase the number of times for this title. So here it says that the title will be duplicate. What the title will be duplicate? For first data, whenever you get inside from the JSON file, whenever you get the first data, for that data also the title will be same. For second data which it getting from the array, the title will again be same. For the third data as well, when it runs these two test cases, the title will be same over here. So it get confused at the time of generation of a report saying that which data that we have to, which test title we have to provide it inside the data driven, like inside the report for the test that it has generated or the test that it have run for multiple datas over here. Example, let's say, let's go back over here. When you say it as a please mute yourself. Please mute yourself, everyone. Thanks. So when you say it as a test over here, right? And again define the same test. So what we have done is we have declared two different test case with a title as test over here. And for second, it started throwing an error saying that duplicate test title test. First declared in this at certain places, and second you are trying to declare in the same file with having the similar title over here. So whatever the logic that you have written inside this test as a title and whatever the logic inside this you have written might be a different or might be a same. But at the time of generation of a report, it gets confused like for which test case we have to generate the report, because the report will be generated by using the title of your test case.
So does that mean when executing a spec file, a single test, if you execute it twice, it's going to report the same error because the
Right,
title will be same.
right.
So that's
And that
exactly
is
is happening there. For each data, and each iteration, it's executing all the test cases.
correct. And that is what the correct is. We are doing data driven testing. We have three
Yeah, I mean,
different
that's
data.
what our logic is, to execute this test for all these three set of the data.
Right. And when you execute for all the three set of data, the same test case will be executed over there. And
Yes.
in that same test case, every time it will report the title as the same title.
And
And
that's
when it
where the
start,
Playwright complaint. Okay.
right. So we have to do a parameterization of our test case, parameterization of our test title over here. And how do we do that? You people are aware of. We can simply use a backtick option over here. And inside this, whenever we have to use something, we can say it as, let's say, for dollar, and then we have a unique value, which is product name. So we can simply say it as dollar data dot product name. And the same thing we can also write it inside this as well, which says that a dollar product name. Now I'll just explain what happened in this case. Now, when we have parameterized our test title, Our product name is unique for every data that we have defined over here, which is first time this one, second time this one, and third time this one. So it goes over here inside this and will generate a title as add the product to the cart for iPhone 13. Validate the product details for iPhone 13. Add the product to the cart for Zara Code 3. Add the product to the cart for Adidas General, whatever it is there. So at that point of time, this will generate a title as unique and all the things will be reported inside the report as well. And that's where it is not complaining here saying that the title is duplicated over here. But still we have one issue that I was trying to discuss earlier, that whenever you make your data-driven testing along with the before each, right? Along with the before each means it will run once before running your test case, right? So what ultimately will happen is it is trying to load all the data. So it will have a 3 different data. And whenever you try to run a test case over here, you will see that whatever we have given inside the before each will run 3 different times. Got stuck somewhere? Okay. So generally this before each is again trying to run. Before each is again trying to run different times over here. So first time it ran, it completed this validation till here. Again, it is trying to run the before each because there are 3 different data. So it
Three
this
steps.
before each. Right.
Last 3 step will execute 3 times.
Right.
Okay. Yeah,
So
it
it will
makes
try
sense.
to do. Right. And what happened ultimately is it will try to do the 3 different times, and before each will be performed 3 different times before it goes to the next one. Right. And that is where whenever we have this data-driven testing, whatever our prerequisite that we have, that we can still place it inside the before each, but whatever the other data that you have which is accepting the data from in the form of data driven testing, that we have to take it inside the test case. So we have to take it inside the test case, and as we are trying to use before each, so we also have to utilize inside this. Now we also have to move our for each over from here to our test level. Now, what will happen in this case is before each will run in the same way, however, it is having a concept, and then it will load all the data. For the first data, it will run all these 2 things. First, before each will run, and then all these 2 things will run over here. For second case, again, second data, again, the same thing happen. And third data, again, the same thing will happen. And this time it will not complain that we are trying to load like before each multiple times. It is still running. Okay, now let's again try to run this, but sorry, I missed. I believe like one of our colleagues were trying to ask anything.
Praveen, yeah, I understand that we are trying to avoid the reporting issue, keeping the same test cases. Can you please, how this par loop you are, removed from there and putting here will avoid it? Um, uh, that context, more context over there, Praveen.
Which context mode?
No, we have. I'm asking about the line number 18. You said that first time. You said that first time it will run this particular test. Again, it will run this another test. So that is a little bit confusing to me.
So what happened over here is whenever you put this over here in like for this one, right? So whenever you put this inside this, right? So what happened over here is if your data, if you have certain data that is available, if you have certain lines or certain step that is available inside before each, which is getting data from your data file or from the JSON or from anywhere, wherever you are trying to get, then this before each will run 3 times before running your test case. Before running your test case, because there are 3 different data available inside this data. Okay, And before each concept is, it will run once before running your test case. And as it is having a 3 different data, so it will run 3 different times first before each, and then it will move to your test case. And what was happening over there is these 3 lines were there, which was basically getting the data from JSON over here, right?
Right.
So before
Yeah.
each will run first time by getting the first data from the array. Again, the same before each will run for the second data over there. And again, the before each will run for the third data, because these steps were trying to get the data from your file.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it was trying to iterate through first before each, whatever the number of data that you have, those many times, and then it was trying to go through the test case that we are trying to execute over here. And that is what the issue was happening, where it was failing every time, the test case over here, where it gets the data as a data URL first time for the first value, second time for the second value, third time for the third value inside the before each. Able to follow?
Yes.
So
Yes.
which data will be passed into the test case? I mean, the third one or the 3 will be going on to the test case.
Right. When you have given in this case, inside the before each, all the data will get passed. Inside the before each. That
Yeah,
is
good.
why I have moved it from test data over here. So okay.
I think
In a
everyone is missing how the for loop is working. So if you
right,
look,
right.
we start the for loop with let data, and there is one bracket start and which ends at the very end of the test cases. So for each data, whole test case will run. That's exactly is what happening. Now I believe you must be understanding.
No,
So
Chandan,
wherever you have,
I get it that if we keep that in the line number 19,
yeah,
so the 2 test cases will be executing 3 times with 3
right,
different test cases.
right,
But if we
Correct.
keep the same line number 19 data, if we keep in the above 12, so that is what the question of MR actually. So what data will be passed over here for the 2 test cases? It will be the third data or
No,
the
no.
3 will be going on?
In this case, it will again be the same things. All the 3 data will go on. All the three data will go on from here as well. All the
So
3 data will go on from here as well. So when you do not have any step that is getting the data from your data file, whatever the data file that you have, that we have already taken it inside the test file over here,
yeah,
test function over here. In this case, what will happen is, even first time it will get the first data and all the data will be passed inside your test case. Second time it will get the second data and all the data will be passed over here. Third time we'll get the third data and all the data will be passed over here. But what happened in this case is, all these value that you see over here, it will be created 3 different times. All these value that you have given inside the before each will be taken 3 different times. Let me just take it one value, which is launch over here.
yeah,
Okay,
that will be better to
and
understand.
remove it from here. So this launch URL, we have taken it inside the before each.
So
Okay,
eventually it will
now
be
what
having
will
a 6
happen is,
times.
once you start running this, first time it will get the data which is inside the data URL. Whatever the URL that we have, it will get the data over here. Before each rule says it will run once before executing the test case, right? So it will have a data. Whenever it gets the data, first time it will get the data which is first URL, right? And before each it is having, so it will run 3 different times for all the 3 different URL that we have. Currently in our case we have the same URL. If it would have been some other URL, you will see the differences over there, that it will run for all the 3 different datas. Because it is before each, so it will try to run with all the data before execution of the test case. Now let's see, closely observe over here. The URL, you will see that it will refresh for 3 different times. First, second, third. Did you observe that? It ran 3 different times before it moves to the second. Here also you will see the same thing. So it executed 3 different times before running. For here as well, again it will try to do the same thing. So whatever you have given inside a before each, that will run first those many times, whatever the number of times that you have data available inside your data-driven file. Okay, and that is where we were trying to take the steps, which is getting the data from a file inside the test file itself. So when you take it outside over here, right, and make it inside your inside this test file. In this case, you will see that as we have given the step available inside the test file. So first time it will get the data. First time, let's make it again at this level over here. So here again, for what will happen is before test will run first, and then the data-driven testing will start. First time it will get the data from the first data, whatever the URL will be available, it will be passed over here. Again, for this, before each will run, the data will be passed over here. For the second data, again, before each will run, second data will be passed inside this, and so on. In this case, you will see that the URL that you are trying to launch will launch only once. Earlier, it was trying to load 3 times. See, only once, and then it moved to the test case. But again, once and move to the test case. But when you try to iterate through the before each, and if you have certain steps that you have given, which is taking the data from the file as a part of data-driven testing, then before each will try to run those many times first and then try to go to the next step. Still any confusion over here?
I'm clear.
From anyone?
Praveen, so that worker
Consider
will
that
be only
everyone
one.
understood.
Praveen, I have one question. That
Please, yes
worker
or no.
only.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Everyone available over here?
Yes,
Praveen,
Praveen,
can
can
you
you
hear
hear
us?
us?
Yes, Praveen. Yes, we can hear you. You're audible.
Am I? mm,
I think he's not able to hear us.
Please,
Yeah, he is having network issue, it seems.
are you able to hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
we are.
we can.
Yes, Praveen, we can hear you.
Okay, okay. Okay, I think then I was not able to hear you people. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so that's basically how we do a data-driven testing from the JSON file.
Praveen, one question I have.
Yes.
Yeah, that I can see while executing the test cases that only one worker node it seems like. So since we have two test cases, so will it not trigger two worker for executing the test cases, or is it like in config we are keeping only one worker?
If you have a sorry, I didn't get your question.
No,
Can
no,
you please repeat?
no. While executing the test cases, I can see only one worker is like node is like executing both the test cases. So
Mhm.
what I was like assuming like it will trigger two. Okay, it is mentioning one
I've
here.
just
Okay, in
given
config.
one.
Oh, okay, okay, then fine. Yeah, that's
So if you mention like let's say 6,
it.
let's say example. I don't know where my system will be able to take the load or not, but let's try to run this, which is npx playwright test dp data driven dot spec dot ps. So here it will take the data one by one from here.
Okay.
Probably my system will not be able to take the load, so might fail some of the data, some of the test case. You can see it is completely blank. So okay, so it will as I had given one, so it was checking, but whatever the type that you provide in that case will be executed over there. So let's again go back to here. I'll just stop the test execution for now. Let's change this to 1. Okay. So this is how we get the data from a JSON, either in the form of single data or in the form of a data-driven testing whenever we have to perform. Okay. Now,
So
mm,
one thing, sorry, Praveen, I'm stopping in the. So what is the best practice to go with if we have a large number of data? Is it an Excel or JSON?
so if you do not want to, I mean, if there is no condition or no situation that you are trying to go for a data-driven testing, then JSON is again a good thing that you can provide it. If you're going for a data-driven testing, I believe like you can go for Excel. If you're
Or
trying to do a
CSV?
data-driven testing, Excel becomes a better option
Best.
over there.
Okay.
But again, if you have a data-driven, like we have done for the 3 different test case, if you have a like 10 kind of things, you can again take the help of JSON and that will be able to perform. But let's say if you have 100 data that you are trying to do a data-driven, then writing 100 times will be a bit complex. Instead of that, we can simply put it inside the Excel.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. Okay. Now, let's see one. I'll take like 20, 25 minutes more today from now on, not after 2030, but 20 minutes close to, I'll take it and then we'll see what we can do. Okay, so here now we'll see the data that how do we also have one um, when we have like currently we are working with one particular application, right? So we have the same URL that we have used over here, same URL that we have used over here as well, and so on. But let's say if we have a different environment, right? So generally when you work inside any of the organization, you will have a different environment. Depending on whatever they have the configuration, you might have a QA environment, you might have um, staging environment, and you might also have something known as a prod environment, right? Production environment. So in that case, we generally maintain the different data set, right? For QA might be a different URL along with the username and password might be different, and other value can be again a different. Again, when we try to work with um, staging environment, the URL might be different and the username password can also be different. And the same for goes for the plot as well, right? So in that case, how do we generally approach? What is the easy and best way that we can follow it over here? We'll see it again in this case. Now, Playwright has one approach where it can basically get the data from a environment file, .env file. Okay, .env is an environment file, which it automatically loads inside our inside wherever you have put it. And for that we have, if you would have gone through earlier in detail, then Playwright has one a location over here inside this configuration which says that require .env.config. Right? So if you uncomment this will be able to load your environment data automatically. Whenever you have any files available inside your package, whenever you have any files available inside your package with .env file, those environment variable, Playwright will, that means this Node.js will be able to automatically load it over here. We have to do a couple of things that we'll be going through over here. But whatever you see a .env, right? This .env is a global way. This .env is a Node.js package that lets us load the environment data, whatever the environment data that we can store it inside the .env file. It will automatically load inside our configuration file over here. Okay, now what I mean to say is, let's see one example over here. Now, this .env that you see is a package that are available inside Node.js. Is a package and it will automatically not be available inside our project or inside our framework or inside the Playwright installation. one thing that we have to, whenever we have to work with .env, how do we work it with? Like, you can create a different files for your different environment. Say it as, let's say, ua.env dot, let's say, okay, let's make it as a data.env, and then provide your environment name over here, which is this one. Again, for the staging environment, if you have, let's say, you can say it as data.env.stg example. And then for production environment, again, you can create one environment folder, which is ending with .env, and then let's say it as save file prod over here. So what we have done is we have created a different files to store the different data over here, depending on the environment that we are trying to use, either QA, staging, or prod. I've just taken the standard one, which used to be generally inside every organization, which is QA, staging, and prod. Right now, whenever we have to work with env file or .env or directly inside the environment file, we have to first install .env package. We have to install a .env package, which is available inside a Node.js. Probably some of you might have heard, or if not, then .env is a Node.js package. It is one of a package that are available inside Node.js, which help us in loading the data that are available inside our environment file, which is having an extension as .env. Okay. First, we have to install this, and using this .env, we'll be able to load all the data automatically inside our wherever you want to use it. Either in, if you want to take it inside your configuration, if you want to take it inside any other places also, we'll be able to do this. But let's see how do we do that. What we are trying to do is, earlier we have seen for JSON, we'll also see for the Excel, but currently we are trying to see how do we get the data. This is similar to a properties file. However, we define a .properties file. It is similar. We are trying to give a .env file. For that, we do not have to initialize anything. We just have to give the file name, and all the data will be automatically loaded over here using the .env package. Okay, so for that, to install .env, we have to install over here using again npm command, as it is a Node.js package. So we can install by using npm. First step is, where did we write that? First step is to install .env file. No, .env is not dot. .env is a package. Okay, so how do we install it? It's a simple. We can simply install by using npm install .env. Okay, and it will install the .env package inside our system. And by using the help of this, it will basically load all the data, whatever we require in terms of working with the environment file that we have given over here. I'll paste the data as well inside this in few minutes. What we have done till currently is we have just installed .env to work with environment file, which is having an extension as .env. Now, if you go inside this again, inside the configuration file, there are some places where we have seen process.env, right? So what is process.env? So this basically depends on whenever you are trying to use, like, let's say a CI, whenever the variable that is coming as a part of CI or other places that you have seen, which is again mentioning a CI, that means it is saying that whenever you are trying to run inside the CI/CD pipeline, this value will be taken care of. And if you are outside CI/CD pipeline, then this value will be taken care of. But what is process.env over here? Process.env is a global object available inside Node.js. The process.env returns an object containing the user environment. It is a global object that are available inside Node.js. And that gives the environment variable that are available inside our system. It will give you the all environment variable, whatever you have with a data file name as .env. Whenever you use a process.env, that will get the data from your .env file. Which .env file? That you have to mention the path over there. Okay, we'll see it again in next few minutes. So this .env is a package that are available inside Node.js, which will help us in loading the data that are available again inside our framework or project using a .env extension. Process.env is a global object that are available inside Node.js, which will help us in getting the data, getting the environment data from file. This .env will help us in loading. This process.env will help us in getting the data one by one. Okay, fine. Now let's say, how do we do that? But before going to this, let's understand one more thing. Okay, let's complete the things for this and then I'll move, else probably you might lose the files. Okay, so .env will load the file, and process.env is a global object which will help us in getting the data from .env file. But now how do we do this? How do we do the setup over here inside this? So we have already imported .env. Inside this configuration, we can import that .env that we have just now install for a .env. So you can simply say it as .env import .env from which package that we are trying to use. We are trying to again check it from the .env package over here. So from the .env that we have recently installed this, which is available inside node modules, and then .env we have over here. One is this one. So from this one, we are trying to get the .env, which is again a .env from this .env package. Now this .env that we have over here, which we are importing again, which will help us in loading the data. But how do we load that data? Right? So for that, it has given an example. If you want to read environment variable from a file, you can use in this way. This is in the form of JavaScript it has given. But whenever we have to work with TypeScript, we can simply say it as .env, and inside this .env, there is a method known as config. There is a method known as config, which is similar to this define config over here, which will accept the value in the form of key and value pair, and that we can say it as, inside this, we have to give the path of the environment file, path of the .env file, which has to load. So what is the purpose of .env? Purpose of .env is to load the data from the file. Okay, whichever file that we are trying to mention over here. This config, if you see, it accepts some of the like optional properties. One of them it accepts is as a path over here. We can just provide a path, and we'll see like how do we provide. But help of this .env is to load the data from the file. And when we go for a process.env will help us in reading the data from the file, from a file, from a .env file, Okay. Now inside this, define .env, inside .env, we have a class. We have basically a method known as a config, a function known as a config, which loads .env file contains into the process env. What it does is, it generally, whatever the path that you have given for .env files, it says that loads .env file contents into a process.env by default. We do not have to do anything. It's just load the data inside the process.env. What is process.env? Is a global object that are available inside Node.js, which help us in reading the data from .env file. Okay, so here we have to provide the path in the form of key and value pair. So path will be the key, and then we can provide the path, whatever we are trying to load it over here. Let's say we do not have to give in the hard-coded manner. What we can do is we can import a path over here. We can import path from path, which will help us in like getting the path and making the path of the file as well. We have used it at the time of file upload. So we can simply say it as path.join. And inside this path.join, we can first give the directory name __ dir name, which will get the directory that you are currently inside. So we are currently inside the Playwright configuration, which is in the root folder. So we are inside the directory, which is basically a root folder over here, right? And join is a method which will combine all the different values that you have given inside this join function or join method. Second, we are in the root folder right now, which is available inside the Playwright config.ts, right? So from here, that means we are in the root folder. From here, we have to go to the test data. So that directory name, we can provide it over here, which is test data. Path.join joins all arguments together and normalize the resulting path over here. And from here, where do we have to go? That data we have to provide it, that environment file that we have to provide it over here. What is the environment file? We have a name which is data.env, and then we have to parameterize this over here. We have a QA, we have stage, we have production. So that we have to parameterize over here. And how do we parameterize? According to a .env, it says that I load the data and all the data inside this, I load the environment file and all the data will be by default available to process.env. All the data by default will be available inside process.env. So what we can say is we can simply say it as process.env is having all the variable, and then we can take a data which is env inside this. What is this data? This data you will be storing inside your file over here, which we can say it as, let's say, depending on whatever the environment file that you are trying to use, whatever the value that you are trying to use inside your environment file. Okay, and what will be those environment file? That will again come from your this process.env. That will come from your this process.env. So process.env will get the complete data one by one from your different environment that you have mentioned, which is QA, prod, stage over here. Okay, and this env that you have given over here, this env, we can get it as a parameter at the time of execution of our test case. We can get it as a parameter at the time of execution of our our test case. When you say it as this env is a variable, this accepts which environment that you are trying to run. So that environment, when you say it as a QA, it will go and take this file over here. When you say it as staging, then it will go and take this file from here. When you say it as a prod, then it will go inside this and take the data from here. So that is what the variable that we are trying to take it over here. Now this variable as a part of env that we are trying to take, and this variable, whenever you try to run, which is npx playwright test, right? We try to run by using npx playwright test. Before that, we have to set it. We have to say that set env equals to, let's say, QA. env equals to QA. And what will happen in this case is whatever the env value that you have used over here, that will get and sit in place of this. So ultimately, it will become QA environment. This complete value will become QA environment, and this will load the data, which is data.env.qa over here. Whatever the value again you mentioned for stg, this will go and take the data, which is data.env.stg from here and so on. But instead of hard coding this env over here, what we can do in the previous step, from here we can get the data inside the environment name. Let's say I'll say it as const env underscore name equals to process dot, instead of hard coding there, we can say it as env. Okay, and this variable we can make it over here as a parameterized. This variable we can make it over here as a parameterized. But how do we make it as a parameterized? By using again a dollar and inside the curly braces. By using again a dollar inside the curly braces, and there we have to use a backtick option. Okay. Now in this case, whatever the environment name, whatever the environment name that will be setting over here as a part of env, which is getting inside the global object over here, that will set it over here saying that data.env.qa, data.env.stg, and so on. Okay. Now let's say if you want to create, let's load it a data, few of the data, let's try to write it over here, and then probably it will make sense for you to understand again. So what we can do is we can write whatever the data that we have written inside the JSON, which is these values. So inside this, we have to write in a, however we try to write inside the like CSV or text file, which is, let's say, I'll say it as base underscore URL without having any gap in between. And then whatever the URL that we have, we can paste it inside this. So I'll say it as, let's say, this is for the QA environment. We have a username as well, so that we can take it as an email value over here, which is, let's say, email equal email without space equals to this value. And then let's say password equals to whatever the value that we have over here, which is test at 1, 2, 3. So this value we have given, I'll currently paste it inside the other file as well to get the value, but I'll change the URL so that we'll see like from which data that it is taking over here, from which file that it is taking over here. Okay, now what we can do is we can create one reusable object. We can create one reusable object which will get the data one by one from this. Else what we have to do is whenever we load this inside any of the file, let's say we are trying to get the data from data inside the DB test from the file, which is environment file. Then we have to load it over here, get the data again one by one by storing inside this. Instead of that, any question over here till now? We have stored the data by just in a plain text. We have created something which this is a normal things that we are trying to get an environment variable, and this is .env, which will just load the .env file inside this. Which will simply load the .env file inside this. I'll just take 5 minutes and we'll end up our session. Now we can go to the utils that we have created, and inside this we can create a file. Let's say I'll say it as env.es, some name that I have given over here. And inside this, we can take all the data in the form of object. We can get all the data in the form of object. And how will we get the data? So we can again simply say it as, let's say, const the variable name that you have given over there. The variable name that we have given over here, which is env. That env we are creating it as an object. That env we are, whatever the variable name that you have given over here, this is env. This env we are trying to create over here as an object. Okay, and inside this, what we have to get? Inside this, all the data one by one, whatever we have written inside all these files, which is base URL, email, and password, we can load it over here as a reusable object, so that we do not have to create every time inside every time whenever you are trying to use QA staging or prod environment. So it's a reusable object that we can take it over here. Inside the object, we have to say it as, let's say, base URL or base URL equals to like colon. And then how do we get the value? We know that all the data have been loaded inside process.env, right? So whatever we have used over here, a process.env, all the data have been loaded over here. By using .env, we have just read the file, and whatever the data that are available will get automatically available inside process.env, which is a global object available inside Node.js. So we can simply refer the value which is process.env. And then from here, what we are trying to get? We are trying to get base URL. We're trying to get the base URL from there. So inside the process.env, every data are available, whatever we have given inside this. So base URL is a URL, email is an email, password is a password. So we can simply get all the data inside this file, saying that, let's say, if you want to again say it as a username, for a username, again, we have the data inside process.env, and that we can use it as an email over here. This will be there will be a comma inside this. This will also have a comma over here. And then again, load the password in the same format, which is password over here. So what we have done is we have just created a reusable object by using what we did export, so that it will be available inside. We can import it inside any of the other file. Okay, and now all the data, which is a base URL, becomes the data that you have given inside a base URL over here. This username that we have gotten over here inside this becomes the username that you have given, and password becomes the password that you have given over here. Whenever you use .env, it will automatically load the data inside the process.env over here. Okay, now let's go inside this where we have used a DP test. So from here, we are getting the data from this one. Instead of this, we can, let's say I'll just remove this. Instead of this, we can simply import this JSON wherever we have to use, like import this JSON value wherever we have to use inside our file. And how do we import this? It's a simple. We can simply say it as import env from where are we trying to use, which is from this env over here, from this utils, and then env file, which is env.ts. Okay, and whatever the value that you have to get, we know that this env is an object over here. This env is an object that we have created inside this, which is having a base URL, username, password. So in terms of a URL utilization, we can simply say it as env.url, which is a base URL, whatever the value that we have given over here. Again, env.username, env.password over here. Again, inside this, the same thing, which is, okay, we have loaded only the data for login. So let's go to the login itself instead of using this, because we have a data from other things as well. So let's go to the login page, and here we'll try to import that file, which is import env from this one. So this env have been loaded. What this env consists of? Base URL, username, and password, and that we can provide it as it is an object. So we know that how do we get the value, which is env.base URL, whatever the value that you have given inside the object, which is base URL, username, password. And that we can paste it over here. Simply replace it with env instead of data, and then env instead of data, right? And remove this data that we were earlier taking from JSON. And now when you try to run this, let's try to run this test case. But in terms of running this test case, sometimes what happens is currently we are trying to run from the command line directly, right? npx playwright test and some other things. Generally, we'll be following one approach where all the commands that we have to run will be writing it inside the package.json. Inside this, we can write all the commands that we are trying to run. And then how do we run these commands is by mentioning a command over here, simple, which is npm run, and then whatever the key that you will be writing for this example. Let's say if we have to run for the QA environment, let's say for QA environment, right? So I've just given test colon QA, and then here you can provide all the values. So earlier I was saying like we have to set the environment over here, right? So we can simply set it like this. give a and symbol. That means first we are trying to run this, and after that, let's try to run the folder which we are trying to go for, npx test. Let's say I'll just give the one file name, which is login page test.spec.ts. One file. Again, when you go for, let's say, staging environment, provide some other values, and prod environment, we can provide some other value. So what we are trying to do is we are simply making it up parameterized over here inside this script. Whatever you write it inside this will help us in executing those scripts by using npm command. Earlier we were trying to write we were trying to use npx playwright test, right? But now it will we will be able to use by using again um, by using npm command itself. So whenever you have given this, how do we run this is by using npm run, and then you have to just provide the script like name key of the script that you have given over here, which is, let's say, a qa environment. Okay, what it will do is whatever the command that you have used, that command it will take at the time of running will be similar to however we run inside the command line. So let's say what happened in this case. First, it is trying to set the environment, which is QA, and then it is using npx command test, which is again going to the test folder and then trying to get the value inside that, whatever the value that are available over there. Now there is some failure which says that got a URL expected string got undefined. So there are some kind of initialization. There are some kind of issue happened in between over here. Okay, but in general, whenever I'll will debug it again in our next session. What is the problem that it is happening over here, and we'll try to debug that. But whenever we have to get the data from .env file, it's pretty simple that we just have to install .env, which will help us in loading the file and then then store all the data inside the process.env. Process.env is a global object. Okay, what we have given over here is env name, which will get the data, whatever the value that we set it as a env. So we have set it as a QA. This env will become QA, and this will get the data, which is data.env.qa. And when we get the data from QA over here, we are placing it inside base URL process.env. Get the base URL from here. Username again get as a part of emails. What is the issue happening in this case? Yes, go ahead. I mean, I believe like there was some question.
Yeah. So
Yes.
let's start from the very beginning. So first of all, I understood that you created 3 environment variable file in which each of them you are having some of the data.
Right.
And you created one util file which is getting the data from this environment variable file. Can you go to the util file first? How it will my question is how it will identify which one to pick, base dot environment, QA to pick, staging to pick, or product to pick, because we are directly saying the product dot process dot environment dot email. I know
Right.
that you have set the value of process dot environment into the package dot JSON. Can you go over there? Yeah. So process dot env value you are saying to this constant, but where this constant value we are passing? In the script you have written, how this constant value is coming, that's I'm not able to understand.
This constant, right?
Yeah.
Right. So this constant will get the data from a global object, which is process.env. And whatever the value that you provide as a part of env, that value, it will get it over here. So if you provide, let's say, QA, then this will get the complete value as a QA. And this QA will be placed it over here inside this env. And now your question is, okay, we have just loaded data. How do I know that this will get it from the QA or staging or any other things?
Yeah.
Right? So for that, we have given one command over here saying that npx set env equals to QA. See over here, env equals to QA in this case.
Oh, so here you are setting the actual value.
Exactly. Here we are trying to set the
So
actual value
basically, we'll
inside.
write the three script for whatever the environment we have. For each of them, we give the environment name, and
Correct.
you have
Correct.
written it. Okay, so usually, like you won't gonna write the individual test. No, maybe you will write only the folder running playwright test.tet. So if I execute this
Right.
using a
Right.
command,
I,
I'm
we
just trying to understand. Let's say if you put only the test, if we execute using this command, which will be npm run qa test colon qa, how I can run the individual test in that way using the script.
Right. So whenever you say npx playwright test, right? So whatever the test cases that are available inside this, it will start one by one, and that will pick the URL, username, password from the QA environment. Okay. Now, how do we run this is we have to just say it as npm. That means node packaging manager. Run the script having a name as test colon QA. That we have given a key over here.
Still a bit confused between flow of this. From environment variable, it is going to the our packagation.
So
There we are set.
which one is confusing over here? Just let me know. I'll explain from here from there.
Packagation part, that is something path I am able to understand how you are setting it. It just I'm
Mhm.
not able to understand environment variable, how that is being set there.
This environment variable.
Now there, here it's a simple script, but
Mm.
where it will be consumed. If you're setting the environment is equal to QA, where exactly it's getting consumed at first level.
Right. So this will go inside the configuration file. So whatever the value that you have given over here as a part of
Okay, yeah.
env,
So, yeah,
this
that's
will
good.
go and replace it over here as a part of env.
Okay, so that env value what we are passing from there gonna sit over here. So it will
Right.
be process dot env dot qa, right?
Correct. Right.
So process
So
dot env is an object, which
right.
and now you are putting the qa. So we have the three data
So
with the
inside
dot
the
product
process.
dot qa dot stages. So you are saying
Right.
if I pass process dot env dot qa, so it will pick the file data dot env dot qa.
Correct.
All
It
right.
will
So
it will basically give the env name over here, which will have all the value that you are trying to pick. So it will go and pick the data.env.qa from here.
okay, wait a minute. So process dot env the okay. So this will become process dot env qa. Environment name is the process dot env qa.
This
Then
process
okay, process dot env is the object you are getting
object,
dot qa means the name.
correct, right? So this process.env, let's try to do one thing. Let's
Yeah,
put it
console
over
log
here.
that part process. Yeah, this I
Or let's
understood.
see.
Like you have given the direct path, whatever will come under the env name, you are appending to it. So makes sense. But how that QA is only coming? That's
Right. So this is a complete environment variable that it has loaded over here. Complete environment variable. Okay, all these things that you see over here have been loaded. And one of the key are available as envqa.
oh, so that's where you are when you are doing the process dot env. It's fetching the value of this variable and
Right,
storing into environment. Now I got it.
right.
Now the
Storing it
environment
over
name is
here.
set. So path is also set. Directory and what it is the exact the name of the file. So now
Right,
it's hitting that particular environment variable file. Now comes to this. Now
right,
we are saying we created one object where we are saying process.env. Yeah. Now let's please explain how we are fetching.
right,
Uh,
right. So
yes.
when it get loaded as a path of the
Mhm.
QA file over here,
Yeah.
it will get all the data again inside the process.env, all the data. And this will, again, if you, did I close that? So again, if you go inside this, you will find all the data again from here, which all the data from the QA file, it will be loaded again over here, one by one order. Let me try to search if it is available. So from this environment QA, there should be one thing available. So ultimately what happened over here is this process.env, that value that we have gotten, it is getting from the QA environment, and from that QA environment, it is trying to get the value as a base URL.
Yeah, that's the one. I understood like how it's getting the value because
Hmm.
process.env is holding the value of those data.environment.
Right,
My
right.
confusion was like how it will come to know that it has to hold the value of the production or the
Understood,
keyword, the staging.
understood, understood. Okay,
Because this is
okay,
an object, so we are okay.
right. So all the values will also be stored over here somewhere. Let me store the value for, let me just get the value. Okay, let me just print the value as a part of base URL over here so that probably you will understand from here. And it has not printed the complete data, but let's do what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to print all the value that we are trying to get it over there. Okay, which is username and which is also a password over here. So we are directly printing over here that you will get all the data inside this. Let's try to run it again. Now this time what I'll say is, okay, anyways, the file name are all same. So let's again try to run this. This will, this time it will get the value, which is currently it is fetching us undefined. That is what we have to basically debug over here, why it is failing and why it is basically throwing us undefined. So if you see this time, this saying that undefined, it is trying to load the data from the file, but currently it is undefined over here. Yeah, where is that? So it is undefined over here inside this from the QA environment. We'll have to debug why it is fetching us undefined, and then we'll set the data inside this. But the whole logic is, we'll debug it again in our next session. But the whole logic over here is that we have created some environment variable, and from that environment variable, we are fetching all the data. We are first, how are you loading that data? By using this path over here. And from there, we are trying to get all the data inside the process.env, which will get the data from one by one, whichever you are trying to set the value in the form of QA staging or production. From there, it will fetch the data wherever it is. This data is loading, get the data, all the data inside the process.env with the same name that we have stored inside the variable inside it, which is base URL, and that will fetch it inside our environment variable, which is base URL, email, and password. Whatever we have given over here, it fetch. Currently, it is throwing us some kind of error. We'll debug this. It's close to 11. So we'll debug this in our session tomorrow, why it is fetching the data in the form of uh, undefined. I'll debug this and we'll
Sure.
also see in our session tomorrow. But this should get the data from like somewhere we are doing some kind of mismatch. We'll see it out and then we'll continue it from here tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll complete this. Plus, we'll also see like one time that will get the data from Excel, and then we'll approach for the annotations, different annotations and tags that we can use inside the system. But this package.json will once again, we'll go through inside our session tomorrow, where we'll write all the other different script as well, so that whatever you write it inside this script, that will be executed by using npm. Okay. Just go through with the recording. If anyone of you have not understood this, just go through with the recording, try to understand this, and we'll again continue in the next session. Whatever the questions that you'll be having, we'll pick it up over there. Okay, sure. Okay,
Yeah. Thank you.
that's it then. Thanks a lot, everyone, and we'll continue again tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.